Welcome to the HP webinar on remote access to advanced computing with Blur Studio. And now, it's my great pleasure to introduce our host, Barbara Marshall, HP's Industry Manager for Media and Entertainment. Barbara, the time is now yours.
Thanks, Sarah, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Sarah said, I'm Barbara Marshall. I'm the Industry Manager for Media and Entertainment here at HP. And we're here today to discuss remote working and how the need to access remote compute power has been exacerbated by the global pandemic. Like many things, it's not a new trend, this remote working, but of course it's been accelerated by recent events. I'm delighted to be joined today by special guest, Sean Walbridge from Blur Studio. Sean has been a long-time user of HP Remote Boost, formerly known as RGS, and some of you may be more familiar with the term remote graphics software. And he's going to share with us how this software enabled him to ensure the team at Blur kept working during this COVID shutdown. Cliff Robin from our technical product planning team here at Z by HP will explain exactly what Remote Boost is and how it works, as well as provide a live demo of the system. So I mentioned that HP had conducted a survey earlier in the year. We surveyed about 1,200 ITGMs and full-time employed end users in US, France, and China. Three key factors that are affecting the way we look at how the workplace is changing, and these three are aggressive competition for specialized talent, and I think people in the media and entertainment business are particularly aware of that. Again, not a new issue. The globalization of talent pools and the diverse platforms and devices that people need, making it quite the challenge to get the right skills at the right time, at the right place. Increased security risks is another key area. And of course, the rise in mobility, whether that be through choice or forced. At HP, we like to think about these changes in three ways: workforce, workplace, and work style. A recent report from Upwork showed that 53% of the hiring managers cited a shortage in talent as a top driver for adopting a more flexible workforce model. From a workplace point of view, we all know we've just had to adapt, and now the workplace can be anywhere that we are, and particularly the home. And then work style: how does the person like to work? What makes the person most productive? Again, research shows that collaboration is key, and over 40% tends to be done virtually, and that was before the pandemic. So, given that 50% of end users feel they don't have the tools they need to work remotely, according to our survey, we felt that it would be a good opportunity to share Remote Boost and how it helps people access their compute power from wherever they are. So at this point, Cliff, could you give us a sort of overview of what Remote Boost and tell us exactly how it works, please?
Absolutely, Barbara. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. So HP ZCentral is the software that we're bringing to the market to help with a greater hardware vision of trying to basically get remote compute to the end user that needs. And of course, in this day and age, it's even more important to make sure that the talent and the folks that are remote, whether it's for a production workflow or some kind of approval process, has the ability to get back to the editing stations or anything else that they happen to not have at home, or it's better centralized. And in that manner, we have what we call an infrastructure overlay technology. And to that end, it means that we have two rules that we do with the software that we're bringing to market. Keep it simple, so don't interfere with what you already do, don't put any demands on it, and work within your own infrastructure. So with that, we assume the machines can see each other. It's called a network infrastructure overlay, usually with VPN, or people are local or spread out on a campus. But you have your end devices, and think of those as things that you have at home, and you have what we call a remote compute resources, the things that we've got left to campus or the things that we all need to get access to. The thing that's different about this software, the ZCentral Remote Boost, and we'll go into a couple more details and a little bit of a demo later, is that we have the ability to provide it just like being there. It's optimized for high-speed experience. It's not designed for the collaboration like we're using now in Zoom, where it's very clunky, it's just very slow. There's lots of latency if you try to share screens. This is designed that it makes it feel like you're just the same as it's underneath your desk. And we do that through a number of HP specific technologies, but it's designed to provide that kind of experience. So anything you would normally do at that workstation or device, it's designed to do that remotely. And then the other part we have with this glueware software, if you will, is IT management. The HP ZCentral Connect. Think of that as sort of a librarian where you have a card that says you're a media student, or you have certain rights to certain information of the reference books behind the librarian. Show them the card, they give you the book, you go away, you take it out, you use it, you close it back up, and you return it and check it back in. That's the same idea here, whether it's helping people go point to point, or it's helping people connect to a pool of machines that all do the same thing, and they can check those pools in and out as they need to. So it helps to optimize the expensive and in-demand workstation resources. And this is done through a web browser that provides this information, provides security via Active Directory, and then lets the person just get to the machines that they need to without having to have any special knowledge of how to connect, just the software installed. So specific to that, the reason that this is also really important is HP is the company that's bringing this to market, in the sense that this is our software. Some of this has been around since 2003, projects we started with NASA, some of it launched this month. HP ZCentral Remote Boost may be known to some of you as remote graphics software. If it is, this would be version 8. But we rebranded this for other reasons, and that'll become apparent as the year goes on. But we're really excited for what we're bringing to you now, and it's been extremely useful in the large number of M&E customers I've worked with in studios to keep the content flowing, to keep the post-production flowing, pipeline animation, whatever needs to be done. Most of those areas of the workflow can meet the need. We have some collaboration tools that we'll talk about a little bit, but imagine that you walk up behind somebody in their cube, pod, or office, or you're in a conference room and everybody's just working together, passing the mouse back and forth and the keyboard. Here, well, show me what you're talking about, let me do that. And you're sharing somebody's desktop. Same idea, but anywhere in the world with multiple machines, people connecting with whatever they happen to have to a common desktop. And with just like being their experience in a high level image quality. And we have an additional feature for that. That is something called image scaling, and I'll demo that for you in a little bit. But what's really key about that, because we support Mac, Mac OS, Windows, and Linux on what we call the receiver side, the person who's remote side, getting to a Windows or Linux machine, the remote compute side. So you're at home getting to the stuff that's on campus or in a data center. And that means that you have all these different resolutions that you could possibly have mismatch on. This solves that because we're using pixel scaling within the home machine or the receiver side. And it's using the GPUs in there to scale up or scale down, just like a high-end DVD player, whether you're going up to 1080p or down to 4K or back and forth. We're doing that same thing with the graphics cards that everybody has, AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA in their local systems. So the other cool thing with this, the point-to-point, that being the Remote Boost software, is license-free with Z. So what do we mean by that? We mean just that. It's free. So it's part of the Z brand, whether it's a Z Book or a Z Workstation. And if you already have one of these, you already have rights to the software. You just download it and go. It automatically knows what kind of machine it's on, and it just works. There's nothing else to do. The receiver, the part that you would access from your remote location to get the session started, isn't licensed. So you just download it on anything and it's good to go. Only the sender side of what we call the workstation side is licensed. And if you don't happen to have HPZ product, we work with everything. It's just software. Along with as long as it's supported by our Windows 10 or Linux OSs, then we support that hardware. And about half of our user base is full paying, whether it's on-premises hardware, physical hardware, or it's virtual machines, or it's in cloud virtual machines, because we provide this better experience of just like being there, highly optimized. And we have lots of security settings. Everything's encrypted with the transmission, and it's designed to really provide an experience that ideally you don't know it's there because it feels like local. Now, HP ZCentral Connect, that's the librarian part that helps the machines together. And it's basically about sharing a pool of workstations. So the reference books I mentioned, clicking to connect, which is to say through a web browser. And then the other thing that's really cool that isn't available out there is remote power control. And this is sort of a free feature in the sense that if you have one of our workstations, most of them come provisioned with vPro, AMT technology. This is something from Intel. And we've enabled this within our interface so that a person can power it up or power down the workstation. It's called out-of-band power management. It just works if you've chosen to provision vPro in your environment. And it provides you, the administrator or the user, the ability to turn the machine on or off, just like you're sitting next to it with a power button. And of course, in this day and age, if the machine locks, it happens to be off when the person wants to connect to it, they have the ability to get to that without trying to figure out how somebody can touch the machine to turn it back on. So that's really, really important. It's something that we're very happy and proud and excited that we've been able to bring to market. This ZCentral Connect launched in March. One of the other things, and we'll get to this at the end, but we do have trial licenses for all this software. It's available from our product websites. Just search for HP ZCentral and you'll find, in your favorite browser, you'll find the links. And you can try it out anytime you'd like. So basically, this is just getting back to trying to, get to the faster storage. So you have that with your remoted systems. You have the storage centralized, but the users are distributed because they shouldn't be tied to that. And it's basically all about the machines and providing just like local. And regardless of what you can connect to, being that HP has the point-to-point, all this, the software and the solutions at both ends, but it really doesn't matter to the software. We're able to support whatever configuration you have as the world's first single source remote workstation solution to centralize the power. So Barb, back to you.
Thanks, Cliff. That was a great overview. And thank you for emphasizing the fact that Remote Boost comes with Z, but is not limited to Z. And that's one of the reasons we've invited Sean to come and join us. So, well, Sean, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So could you talk a little bit about Blur Studio, the type of work that you do and how you've kept the wheels turning over the last few months?
Yeah, so Blur's been around for 25 years. We're primarily Windows-based. We do game cinematics, trailers, and now we've gotten into episodic animation with Love, Death, and Robots. We've used RGS at Blur for quite a while for our remote artists. We've realized that there's some artists that don't want to necessarily live in Los Angeles, so we've hired remote artists and they connect into workstations at Blur. And then also the people in LA, instead of driving into the office on the weekend to check on renders and stuff like that, they are able to remote into their machine using RGS and check on renders or even do some work late at night after their kids go to bed or something. So we've got some HPZ workstations, but we're mostly white box. We kind of got an idea that the pandemic was coming up. We'd been reading the news and we tried to get ahead of it. We sent out surveys to people to figure out what they had at home and tried to identify any issues with internet connectivity and stuff like that. And we started to have everybody test working from home. And we started doing the full transition on a Thursday. And by the following Friday, a little over a week later, the entire company was offsite working from home. So I was surprised at how well it went. And it's just been fantastic. Artists are now even asking if they need to stay in Southern California to work at Blur, if they can move for a better quality of life because traffic here kind of sucks. And now we're even looking at hiring people that we wouldn't have access to normally. We've got people working from all over the world, and now we've got a much bigger talent pool. We have people at home, some are on Windows, some are on Mac, like I am, and it really doesn't matter on that end.
On that point, Sean, actually, if we go to the next slide, I think that will give a sense of your reach and scale of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's really impressive. We actually had one person who was based in LA. She decided she wanted to move back home to Taiwan. I don't think she's actually on here because it was just recent. So she moved back to Taiwan to be with her family, and she's using RGS to connect into Blur, and it's working great. We typically see for about 150 people. We typically see about 150 megabytes per second of traffic. So I was really surprised. We get questions all the time like, how fast do I need internet at home to be able to RGS? And it's surprising how little it is. And this is kind of bringing up our future. Like, do we stay the same size in the office? And we'd already talked about moving to rack mount workstations or cloud-based workstations using remote boost. And now the new broker, ZConnect, would make that even easier. So we don't know that things are ever going to return to normal. We'll probably be a hybrid where some people are on site, some people are off site, and all due to remote boost.
So I know from talking with you previously that a lot of these things you were already beginning to think about. So how has COVID sort of changed the time scale of things? Massively
accelerated it. We never expected to be 100% offsite, and ZBoost has really helped show that it's possible to do all this.
Mm. And for the audience, can you talk a little bit about the workflows and pipeline that you have? I know people are always curious about what software you can run with remote boost remotely.
Absolutely. Our entire pipeline is using remote boost, so it's possible to do everything. We are running Windows. We typically use 3D Studio Max from Autodesk and Maya from Autodesk. We use ZBrush. We use Nuke from the Foundry, and we use Houdini, and then Premiere Pro. So we use kind of basically the standard kind of tools, and they all work just fine.
And you talked a little bit about when you were doing the internal survey, kind of what network connections people need. Can you talk a little bit about what is typical and what sort of latency, if any, you experience?
Yeah, the network speed for users at home really isn't that much. They need probably about 10 megabytes per second. The bigger thing is latency, and we've got people working, typically our LA people, we are seeing 20 millisecond. We've got someone who 10 hours a day is using RGS from France, and he's getting about, I think he was up around 50 millisecond and it was still working fine. I believe the person in Taiwan is seeing about 90, and it's probably on the edge at 90 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm. So this is a good opportunity, I think, to bring Cliff back into the conversation. And Cliff, do we need to switch screens at all?
Actually, no. We've been in what we call the collaboration mode at the same time. That basically means that Sean and I are actually sharing this desktop. Neither one of us is local to this. It happens to be in Fort Collins, and I'm from Loveland, and then Sean is dialing in from wherever he's dialing. What part of the country are you in, Sean?
I'm in Southern California.
Southern California. Sorry. So what we're doing here is doing the collaboration mode, and you can kind of get a sense of the experience that we have here. Is I'm going to go into our bordered mode. So I'm actually sharing this window with you. So what we're showing here is the actual remote boost software, and there's a couple interesting things here. I'm going to bring up a little application. This is native with Windows. The purpose of this, though, is it runs at whatever a normal monitor refresh rate would be. In this case, 60 frames per second. But if you look at this little counter up here, these are the frames per second that are being broadcast from the remoted machine to both Sean and I. So whatever this number is exactly what Sean and I are seeing. It's the same experience. And what's critical about this is, Sean, go ahead, you can play with the V a little bit. Sean's actually driving now. It just, you know, no hands. So it automatically switches back and forth. There's what we call a floor that allows for this collaboration. And because he's on my desktop, whatever software things I have rights to, it's the same idea as if he just walked up behind me and said, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Why don't you do, here's the keyboard and mouse, show me. Those type of things, the normal things we used to do every day. So that gets it here. And you can see the frame rate that's up here is very important, because that will tell you if it's above about 24 frames per second, we're having a great experience. It does look just like local to us. So the other thing that's really interesting about it is the pixel scaling that I mentioned. And what I'm going to show you with that really quick is that, here, Sean, I'll go ahead and drive, is that I'm sharing what is called a 4K display. So what does that mean? Well, I have 4K worth of pixels being shared to you, and the critical thing with that is I'm remoting into a 1080p machine, very standard. If I were to just look at this locally on my machine here with my 4K, it's not a great experience. I mean, it is there, but I either have to have display matching remotely or locally, and that's called the context change. So that gets away from first do no harm, because it means I've either forced resolution and setting changes on my local machine, which might crash stuff, or I've done it to the remote machine. And if you're rendering, that's a problem. What do you guys do right now, Sean?
That was one of the things that when we addressed in our survey was finding out what artists had at home so we could try to match everything up. And this makes it a lot easier with the image scaling. So we've got typically 2 quad HD monitors at the office, and then artists have whatever they have at home.
And what's really interesting is that scenario I mentioned before about mismatched OS and machines, we're actually doing that. I'm on a Windows machine. What are you on, Sean?
I'm on a Mac.
And how's your experience?
Totally fine. Yeah.
That's what's great too. It's a bring your own device. We're up at 45, 50 frames per second. And as you saw earlier, I can go to a full screen experience here. And you can see that we've got 2 toolbars. We were in what was called, it covers up a whole monitor. So from my point of view as a local user, this looks like just a 4K display to me, and a 4K desktop that happens to actually been upscaled to 1080p. You know, one of the things, Sean, that gets asked a lot is the quality of the image. Is that suitable for your needs, and how do you tell?
Yeah, so we've got artists using it all day, every day, and we've got editors using it, and the image quality really isn't an issue. I was actually really surprised with the editor being able to work in Premiere all day, and the color accuracy. We've got dream colors at home. Like, we gave the artists the dream colors they had at their art desk, and they took them home, and now they're able to do full color accurate work at home. So
is it fair to say that this has allowed whatever normal workflow you had in the office to stay intact, and the humans didn't have to, you know, the technology just adjusted to the humans, so the humans could stay with the way they worked?
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. So, you know, with this, and, you know, I think the key thing you talked about, how quickly that we were able to or how quickly you're able to implement this and get people working. Has there been any work product that you can talk about that you've released since that you've created with this new workflow and the ZCentral remote boost software?
Yeah, we had a few projects that we were working on in the office, and then kind of had to transition midway. And one of them was a project for Xbox, and we can actually bring it up now.
Okay, great. And I do apologize for the folks on Zoom. Sean and I are going to have this really great experience. You can notice what's going on in here. And then interesting to point out, because we're a true difference engine, and Sean was talking about the bandwidth and how surprisingly lightweight it was, we do have our moments, and you'll see them where we do start getting into the bandwidth, but we are purely a difference engine in this mode. There's another mode we have that uses hardware acceleration with NVIDIA graphics cards, something called AVC, Advanced Video Compression. What's important to that is it does have a slight degradation in color, but it provides a 5 to 7x improvement of bandwidth. So if somebody had to say a 10 megabit per second limit on a VPN or some connections at home, or somebody's really on a slow connection, at 1080p and 30 frames per second, you can have a really great, just like me, their experience in that kind of bandwidth. We're a little bit more unconstrained at home, but more importantly, if nothing's happening, nothing gets transmitted. We have about a 1K heartbeat pulse, and then there's no information. So if somebody leaves the screen up all day, or 6 of them on the same computer, because there's no issue having multiple connections, there isn't any impact to the network. So that's something that's important too, is playing nice and being a good citizen. So let's go ahead and run this. And let me make sure I'm sharing the audio here.
And should we also add that, well, you mentioned it, that people watching this from Zoom are obviously going to have a Zoomified experience that's not reflective of what Sean would be seeing.
Whoops. Yes, Sean, thank you.
I tried to help.
Yes, I was clicking on the right thing, Sean could tell. And you're getting some of the audio.
The world is filled with.
I'm going to go ahead and mute it on my end. But we're going through this, and this could be a review cycle that this is content that Sean needs to approve. So he's getting to see exactly what I'm getting to see, and we're also, of course, sharing a Zoom session at the same time, so that can be a little bit challenging. But it's really important from the workflow point of view that even though she eventually gets eaten by the frog, it's content that Microsoft liked, and you were able to publish it, I think, last week.
Yeah, this came out a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, the project really went well for us. We noted, like, we actually sent out surveys to all the employees to see how they were feeling about their productivity before and after, and how did this overall impact their productivity. And for the most part, everybody said they were at least 90, 95%. Some people said they were 110 because they had nothing else to do. They couldn't go outside because LA was in a lockdown. So they felt they were even more productive than they would be at the office. And a lot of people, for the quality of life, not having to commute an hour and a half like I do, that made their life so much nicer.
And one of the interesting things too, that I always find unique, is obviously you can tell this was filmed. This is a 30 frames per second content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because we're a different engine, we're not actually running faster than that. You can see this up here, that the content is actually running at that, because the pixels aren't changing faster, even though the eye isn't aware of that. But if I go ahead and put both of these up here, just to kind of give you a feeling of the flexibility of software, the B is running at 60. So it goes ahead and tries to send the extra pixels over, even though we're running 30 frames per second in the background. So depending on which one I select, it automatically is going back and forth to optimize for the whatever the user had selected, to make sure they're getting that high-end frame rate. Any additional input or questions? Oh, sorry, Bob. Sean?
I didn't have anything.
No, Cliff, I was just going to say the point you just made just before we move to an open Q&A, I think is worth emphasizing. And from a security point of view, the fact that we are only streaming pixels, the content is not moving off that centralized workstation. So I just wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So thank you, Barb. This is just sending pixels. So what do we mean by that? Well, there's a compression engine in here that just takes these pixels, and it's something that's called a frame buffer. It's literally what's put out to the portal, this display that we're seeing. Everybody's got a portal they're looking into, and that's full of pixels, and you have a graphics card that's pumping it out. It's just like flipping the flip cards, the flip pages that we used to see, where you just flip the pages and you see a little animated character run across the corners. It's the same idea. That technology hasn't changed. We're still dealing with images, and if the image doesn't change, we don't send it. And when we do send it, we encrypt it, and we're using the latest encryption, 256-bit, and it's only the pixels that are changed. So if somebody did happen to decrypt a given stream or a given frame, it's not going to make any sense, because it doesn't have any reference to the others, because we're just sending what's sent. Plus, since we don't have file transfer, there are protections on the USB devices, whether you're using Wacom or 3D Connect mouse, or you don't want people to do that, or you don't want to have anything more than a keyboard and mouse. there are ways to dial all that down. There's ways to control how people get access and those type of things. So encryption is number one for us. This is used in all levels of industries, including defense and schools, medical divisions. So there's lots of areas that we've had to make sure that we complied to the different requirements that they felt we could pass their cybersecurity tests and be safe to use in their environments.
That's a good point, Cliff, because I think when I look at the attendees today, we've attracted quite a broad audience, not just media and entertainment folk. So, as you say, we have so many different use cases proven using this technology. So I'm going to suggest that we open it up to Q&A. We have had a few questions already, so I will sort of read out the questions and see who's most appropriate to answer. So one of the questions was the remote turn-on option. Does that mean having Wake on LAN activated, or is that something different on HP's implementation?
That is something different. So that is, I'll try to get up for you for a second, but if you search for Intel vPro, you'll find their technology. It's an umbrella technology. One of the things they have is called AMT. AMT is something that ships with Xeon CPUs and some Core CPUs, and it's something that's part of most of HP workstations. If you have that, it basically uses the onboard network card that's part of the motherboard and provides this separate management engine that you can enable, provide security and encryption keys to, and it gives you out-of-band power. So Wake on LAN is exactly that. Plus, it's also limited to specific what they call subnets with address with systems, and it also doesn't work if the system is hard off, where this does. So it's a completely separate thing, and really provides the most flexibility for both the administrator and the end user.
Great. Okay, the next question is, how is HP positioning this against the Moonshot product line? If my primary driver is remote compute, but I'm not a graphics content creation shop, are there any benefits to this stack versus connecting to Moonshots with Citrix?
So that's a great question. It's something that we work with customers all the time. It really does depend on what you're trying to do. So we are designed for an enterprise class workstation experience. Most of the Blade systems, they do use Xeon, but they're using Intel graphics. Maybe it works okay with Adobe if you've got enough memory and different things in there, and it's a great solution. We have lots of customers using Moonshot. So from a software point of view, that's a non-Z system that they've enabled. Many aircraft companies and engineering firms across the world use that for their collaboration. Everybody's centralized into the Moonshot systems, but they're using Remote Boost, but they're also using Citrix or VMware. It really depends on what works best for your company, and it's something that we talk to customers all the time about what makes sense when and how and where, because you're right. There are issues or areas, if you don't have that high graphical need, this might not be the right solution for you.
Okay. Is there a generated lag issue when using collaboration mode? And does the collaboration mode prioritize the cursor user over just the viewer? In other words,
sure. I think I understand, Barbara. Yeah. So the answer is, it's a shared experience. So what I mean by that is it's really dependent upon both of our connections, because we're really trying to have the best experience. If Sean was on a very poor network connection, it would affect all of us. But Sean has some controls that he could use to adjust the image quality local to him, or I could crank it up on my end. And it's not going to affect his experience, but it will affect mine if he's the limiting factor in that. So that's something that's we're trying to make sure that ubiquitous is you can lower the quality and use the advanced video compression and get in within a 10 megabit of the sender. But if you have somebody who's connecting tethered into their phone, it's probably not going to be the best experience.
And while you've got this interface up, one of the other questions, Cliff, is can we see what the management console looks like? And while you're bringing that up, assuming you're able to bring that up.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Sure, I've got a question for Sean. So, Sean, Do you ever offload compute functions such as video rendering from After Effects, for example, to the back end? Are you able to sort of separate?
Yeah, I saw that question. You could use RGS to connect to a remote machine in your facility that had the Adobe rendering, but a proper render manager would probably be better for that than just because you wouldn't need to sit there and monitor it that way.
Mm.
I'm not super familiar with the Adobe offline rendering.
Sure, but I'm thinking as well, just as a principle, software aside, one of the beauties of Remote Boost is that you can actually connect to more than one machine.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, yeah, the answer is you could be remoting into multiple machines. You could have one set up to be doing your rendering, you could be doing your effects on another machine, and you could be reviewing somebody else's work.
Yeah, we have some users at Blur that do have multiple machines and they connect into both machines. I don't know if they have one on each monitor, but they absolutely do use that because some of our workflow, they want to launch their simulations, like for hair and cloth, they want to launch simulations and they need to kind of keep an eye on that. So they'll have both machines connected at the same time with Remote Boost. I always call it RGS, but
it's okay. A lot of people do.
Bringing back to Cliff's mention of someone using their phone, we actually had an artist recently who was using his phone as a hotspot because he was at his parents' place and they had really bad internet. And he actually did work off of his cell phone hotspot. I was blown away.
Yeah, it does work. I've heard that a lot. I've gone through some tests with some studio executives where they didn't believe it. And they're like, okay, we have to use this. And that was kind of the end of the story, because at worst, the beauty of this is no matter what the experience is on your remote end, it's pristine on the workstation. You're not dealing with it, we're just dealing with the visualization, just like TVs used to give you static and, the picture might get fuzzy, but you knew the content that was being sent was fine. It was something to do with your local connection. Same thing here. And of course, that's extremely important when what you are delivering are visual images.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it looks like you've got the interface up. So do you want to just take?
Sure, and apologies, we had to go through a little bit of a rebuild. So we don't have all the security keys in here yet that would normally be there. You see it's designed to have authentication in here that assures the user that they're connecting to a legitimate source. But in terms of the interface, I only happen to have 2 machines in here, but these are the library books that we talked about. These are the things that I can pick to and access. These are the pool, you can create pools, and that's basically saying I take machines and I take users or security groups, which are Active Directory things, and I group them together. And I just create sets. Here's all the people doing colors, or here are people doing motion cycles, here are people doing models, and there's 6 or 7 machines that are there. They could just set them up in a pool and check them out. Private host is the ability to take a given machine, and if I select this, I could actually say, oh, that's Sean's machine now, except I'm going to make this mine so you can see it here in a second, and say that way whenever a person logged in, they would see this machine is theirs, full stop. It's not going to get given to a selected group of users as part of a pool. It can't even be accessed. The security groups and users are basically the same thing of having the Active Directory information imported in here. And then the session is just a little bit of session information. And you can see Sean and I are in here and set up. And from my experience as a user, I would have logged in, I click on choose a host, and then we have pools set up. You'll see those here. And then I see my host right here that I can connect to. If I click on choose a host, it basically would come up. And since I'm already on the system, we'd have it in the session, but we have to already be set up in session. So that's really kind of the experience. It's very simple in terms of implementation. It runs under Windows 20, any Windows Server system. It just is something that runs on top of it.
And on that topic, on OS conversations, so it's Windows and Linux compatible, isn't it?
Correct. On the sender side, so that would be the part that, let me bring the, let's see, to close the PowerPoint. But yes, it's the center side, which are the parts that have the workstations, whether they're racked or under somebody's desk. This is Linux and Windows, Red Hat versions and Ubuntu versions. On this side, you have your endpoint devices, and these could be a Mac OS, Windows 10, and or some Linux flavor out there.
Great. So Cliff, I've got a couple more questions. Does ZCentral support 2FA and or Microsoft MFA?
Well, again, we're dealing within your environment. So whatever you would have set up for accessing the machines, that's how we're going to be set up for accessing them. So we're still using the authentication that you're having there. So when I logged into this, I was using my my domain login. If ideally, I'm on a system that are already logged into a domain. So when I connect to this website as a user, it would have just logged me in because I'm part of the domain. But when it comes to out of the domain, no, we don't support those yet. But we are working toward that. And there are, but most of this, including the administrator, can be completely domain controlled for security reasons.
Okay. And then the 2 or 3 questions really asking about how we compare with things like AMT and also VMware. Can we?
I'm not sure what the first part meant. Compared to AMT.
AMT.
RDP?
Maybe Citrix VDA. So the question is, they've got traders working from home using thin clients connected to their physical Z640, Z4s. Via Citrix VDA, it's working well. We are now doing a proof of concept with Z2s in the data center instead of the Z4s under the desk. We are using AMT for remote off-on and KVM.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they're using AMT for that. So that's a really good use case, and they're using something that, so that if you might have heard, they're using AMT for KVM, which is keyboard, video, mouse, and they're using it for the power control that I mentioned. They're able to do that because they're using machines that are using Intel graphics. The only way that you could get KVM with AMT is if you're using an Intel graphics product, which isn't workstation class for the most part. Mm-hmm. It's okay for running some things, but we started the Z2 and move up in what you're wanting to use. So if you've got very expensive compute hardware, you want to be able to get the full access out of it. You're not going to be able to get that with something like RDP. Now with Citrix and VMware, they're great within their environments. We tend to have better absolute performance, but you may have an infrastructure that's already set up for that, and that's a better way to go. As with so many things, there's lots of different ways to slice the onion, and we work with customers all the time to try to find out what's simple, what's easy, what works for their situation. What I can tell you is, because we're dealing purely with point-to-point and we're an infrastructure overlay, we are the easiest to implement point-to-point. What did you find out, Sean, when you guys were setting this up? I mean, any terrible experiences you want to talk about? And you're on mute, sorry. But I'm sure it was amazing whatever you just said. Thank you so much.
Everything was amazing. No, we really didn't have any issues getting everything set up. Like I said, we managed to convert 150 people in just over a week, and it was absolutely painless. We did the only issue that we had. No, we do it a bit differently, but we're moving to a VPN very soon. So.
And there are other ways to get this accomplished without using VPN. There's tricks and technologies out there. Was it port forwarding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that have worked great and provide high-speed access, but they're more fiddly. It really depends on your situation, what you want to, the knowledge you need. If you don't have Citrix experts or VN, do you want to add them just for having the remoting solution? If you already have them, maybe it's easy. Everybody's different. And as far as the trading floor folks go, one of the areas that, because of the way we work, whether we're working with 2, 4, or more displays, because it's all one large frame buffer, when it comes to matching what the experience is on the remoted machines and the end user machines, they can do display matching, and it works great. We've worked with a lot of banks. Additionally, because we're at such a low level, we don't run into driver issues that you may run into with Citrix or VMware because of the special needs and whether things are virtualized, unless you're going completely to the metal and everything. But again, we're simple. It just overlays on top of everything else.
Sorry, I don't know if that was me. Cliff, we're going to have one more, I'm going to squeeze one more question in. And that's about, does ZCentral allow you to control timeouts for all workstations? In other words, can you have users that are idle for 8 hours, can they be logged out automatically, or can you program it so that they're logged out?
And that's a, oh, go ahead.
And can they also be set up to auto restart when no one is logged at midnight, for example?
So a couple answers to that. In the current form of what we have for ZCentral Connect, the answer is no. But a lot of companies would normally have policies like that anyway with the machines in the office, especially if they were pool machines or in a common area, that it did automatically via registry settings or through Active Directory, you impose policies that tell the machines to log out or reboot, whatever you make. All that stuff stays the same. Whatever you would normally do still works fine, doesn't affect us at all. The next version we come out with in the fall will have the ability to take the machine back if the user hasn't accessed it for a while. In terms of a timed reboot, that feature is not in there, but we will have the ability for scripts to connect. If somebody wants to go that extra mile on an IT area, they can talk to this through a mindful API and a RESTful API, excuse me, and tell it to do those things. So we are providing more functionality for our customers to get there. I would expect those features will be in subsequent versions. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks, Cliff. Cliff, could you go back to the PowerPoint, maximize, and go to the last slide?
Well, you realize you could ask me or Sean.
That's very true. I could, couldn't I? So actually, slide 21. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we're now going to, well, so a couple of things. If we didn't answer your question, apologies. If you go to this web link, that will give you access to a lot of information, technical specs, frequently asked questions, white papers, etc. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for taking time out to join us, and hand over to you, Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Clifton. And thank you for joining the HP webinar on remote access to advanced computing with Blur Studio. We hope you enjoyed today's event. We look forward to hosting you at our next webinar. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.